Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's dialing in today for this session. I hope everyone is healthy and safe during these challenging times. Thank you for dialing in today. Today's session is about predictive delivery using a data-driven early warning system. My name is Bhavin Shah, and I will be your host for today's session. Simply put, if I was to sum up what today's session is going to be all about, especially at a time when the entire world is talking about flattening the curve, today's session we'll talk about being proactive and getting on the offense by getting ahead of the curve, obviously from a software delivery perspective. Some housekeeping rules before we get started. This session is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you shortly. We will have about 40 minutes of presentation time, followed by about 10 minutes of Q&A. My request is you view this in full screen mode. If you have questions for us, please feel free to post them on the Q&A panel at any time. If you want to learn more about either of the companies participating today, GlobalLogic or Klera, you're welcome to visit our websites. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our esteemed speaker for today, Ashwani Nandini. She is the Vice President and heads Delivery at GlobalLogic. Nandini has been responsible for predictive delivery at scale, instilling engineering rigor and partner delight from engagement inception to closure. She has been transforming delivery in the product engineering service space for over 2 decades through a wide range of data-driven frameworks. Nandini brings not only the experience, but the expertise that is grounded in reality, and it'll be exciting to see her share her experiences today. Now, before I hand over the baton to Nandini, I would like to bring up a quote that someone wise once shared. Most of the world will make decisions by either guessing or using their gut. They will be either lucky or wrong. That sets the tone for how Nandini began her journey and what she did to overcome this. Nandini, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bhavin. Thank you so much for the kind words. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending upon whichever part of the world you are in. Thanks a lot for taking time out to attend this webinar. Before I jump into the topic, wanted to spend a few minutes talking about GlobalLogic, the company that I have been part of for close to 13 years now. GlobalLogic is one of the leaders in the product engineering space. We integrate strategic design and complex engineering with agile delivery to help our clients transition into their digital business. GlobalLogic touches almost, everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. So basically it touches you on an everyday basis, whether it is the cool fan engagement platform for sports lovers or retail kiosks for consumers or class 1 medical device software that saves lives or simply bringing content to life. GlobalLogic in numbers, we've been in business for close to 20 years. We are truly global because we have our employees in 14 countries, 26 product engineering centers, and design studios in New York and London. In India, we are there almost in every major city: Noida, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, Nagpur, Pune. 1,500 plus product releases per year speaks volumes about the growth that we have seen in the last few years. I'll jump straight into how the world looked like before we came up with this early warning system framework. So let's talk briefly about the pre-early warning framework world. So this is a world that I'm talking about a few years ago when GlobalLogic wasn't that big, when individual heroics were enough to manage delivery, even inconsistent processes or insufficient tools usage did not hinder deliveries. So basically, we were able to manage deliveries. But as we started to scale, these very these very same things that we were able to manage became challenges. And the tools that people were using, whether it is Excel or Google Sheet and mails and PowerPoints, all of that became a huge challenge, because when something had to be retrieved, it was a nightmare, because it was tucked away in some email or some deck, or maybe simply in people's heads. Also, the delivery assessment was very, very subjective. It pretty much depended on the personality of the project manager, right? A very pessimistic person would rate maybe an action item which is delayed as a risk, while a very optimistic person would brush even a serious risk as something that can be managed at his or her end. And also, delivery is, we understand it is challenging, right? That is the reason we have layers of management, so that people can review and people can understand and identify blind spots and take corrective actions. But all of these challenges definitely led to some surprise escalations. And this, because of these challenges, it was always difficult for us to stay ahead of the curve. And our approach to surprise escalation most of the times was very reactive, and also most of the times very defensive. It was all about finding an escape route. Oh, we got into this problem because this methodology has this problem, or this tool has this limitation, or this customer doesn't get it, and so on and so forth. Just to show you how we used to do it long back, on the various parameters, the delivery and the account manager would rate themselves, would rate the engagement on these various parameters, and they would just simply color code it. And the colors were simple: green, amber, yellow, red, depending upon how healthy or how unhealthy they felt. So it was more a gut feeling, right? And also, surprising part is, there were times when the delivery manager and account manager were not in sync, right? One would think it's a green while other would think it's a yellow or an amber. And you can drill down. At best, you would get some subjective comments. So that's the best we could get. So before I talk about the challenges, we all understand, right, that the world is changing. Software is eating the world. You've heard this phrase multiple times. And every organization is trying to become a software organization. The programs are becoming more and more complex. And if you look at the methodologies today, you have Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban, SAFe, and whatnot. And also, you have the scenarios of multi-vendors where the overlap is there, and the boundaries are not very clearly defined. And then you have these you could be responsible for a release without having all the controls at a scrum level, or one vendor's could be the scrum master while you have team members from another vendor, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of complexities and nuances that are there in the methodologies. And add to it the financial models, like risk reward framework, or SLAs and KPIs and penalties, and payments tied to quality deliverables, defect rate, etc., etc. So basically, a lot of complexities are added. And then the favorite, digital transformation engagements, which are very, very complex, because when we talk about digital transformation engagements, we are not just talking about technology transformation. We are actually talking about organization change management, digital assurance, design thinking, and whatnot. And this adds a whole new gamut of program management. And and my very favorite, the sales to delivery handoff. Sales goes and promises the sun, moon, stars, while delivery grapples with the ground realities. And because of this, the engagement inception is weak, and you don't start off on a good note. And add to it the challenges of customer not being very accepting of your suggestions on a process or a methodology. So there's always this reluctance, because customer wants to do something really quick. They don't believe in doing a particular process, or generally sometimes there are limitations that a tool imposes, because many a times the tool does not allow you the granularity that you may want, and so on and so forth. while most of the challenges are very genuine, in my experience, I have also seen that project managers or the delivery leaders tend to take shortcuts and tend to cut corners. So they will not, go back to the customer and try and educate them or try and convince them, or they won't try and find a solution to a limitation imposed by the tools and so on. So, definitely lots of challenges, that had to be addressed. So I take a pause before I, move to how did we transition to a data-driven early warning system?
Yeah. Thank you, Nandini. Thanks for setting the stage here. Many enterprises, especially delivery leaders inside of those enterprises, whether a medium size or even a large scale enterprise, which is publicly traded, etc., they all seem to say that they add buffers to their delivery schedule, but still end up reaching out to the customer a few days before the delivery date to either negotiate scope or ask for an extension to avoid penalties. Right now, whether you might be a product engineering services company or a product company, it doesn't matter. Similar behavior patterns are shared by delivery leaders. Now, also, the enterprises have stated that they're not ready to become data driven since the underlying data is not in good shape. One thing that may help the audience before you discuss, what you did in the early warning stage, did you face this as well as you were beginning to scale? And more importantly, how did you measure the impact of this on customers? Because ultimately they feel what happens here in terms of delays and negotiations of scope in terms of impact to them, right?
Yeah, so Bhavin, thanks for asking this question. I would never ever recommend adding more people and buffers because then customers get used to it and you also fall into that trap. And it's very, very difficult to come out of that trap. So you should shy away from doing that. And the other part is there has to be, there is that inflection point where you need to get out of that mode of being reactive and waiting for something bad to happen, because you kind of know that it is coming. So what is important is to uh, is to, because we also fell into this trap, to be honest. We noticed that our NPS was starting to decline because we were not proactive, we didn't see it coming. So it's very, very important for us to get out of that rut. And that's exactly what we did, that we realized that we need to do something, we need to shrug it off, and we need to get into this data-driven early warning system where we know exactly what is going to hit us, and we know it as soon as possible and as early as possible. So that's what we did, and the results are amazing because our NPS is miles ahead of the industry benchmark, and our surprise escalations have gone down dramatically. So I would say, definitely we need to shrug it off and get out of that trap. And the other part about is the data ready? I would say you will never be ready to start. So you have to start with what you have. And this is like your machine learning model. It gets better and better over a period of time. So you just have to be at it, and you have to start somewhere. And the discipline will slowly build. And that's the way to go about it. You can't wait for the perfect timing. The perfect time never comes.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So I will jump to the early warning system framework. So most important, I think it's very, very important to know what to measure. And we developed a lean measurement framework which could kind of handle the various engagement models, the delivery methodologies, and the customer nuances that I spoke about. And we gave it the name called Minimum Viable Metrics Framework, MVMF. Metrics predominantly at any point of time should be able to tell you the schedule, scope, and the quality. Will we deliver what we promised on time with quality? I think that's the question that one must be able to answer at any point of time. A very simple yet powerful statement that has stayed with me for a long time is the inputs will be variable, right? Because we spoke about all these methodologies and models and all of those complexities and nuances. So the inputs will never be the same. There will always be something very, very specific, a very specific scenario, but the output is always consistent. Every customer, no matter what kind of an engagement, they're always looking for one thing: please deliver on time with quality what you committed. So what is important is to apply contextual process. So that's where the applicability comes in, because every metric is not applicable for every scenario. So we need to also figure out which metric applies under what circumstances and scenarios. So we put together something called as a measurement framework applicability, which is like a guideline for the delivery leader. A simple example, let's say, it's a staff augmentation model. Then the only thing which we should measure is the individual's productivity or the quality of the deliverable of the individual. So let's say the code quality of what the individual delivers. That's it, right? There's nothing else which will make sense in this kind of a scenario. Also, when I talk about metrics threshold, I'm talking about, see, when we say early warning system, we want that whenever the value goes beyond the threshold, we should get an alert, we should get an early warning, right? But again, the threshold could be different for different customers, could be different for different delivery units, right? Because let's say a schedule variance of 1 week may be acceptable in one scenario, but may not be acceptable in another, or a velocity dip of let's say X percentage may be acceptable in one scenario, may not be acceptable in another, and so on. So it's very important that we are able to customize it. But a word of caution, we don't want to go overboard, because if we go overboard, then it becomes too granular. But we don't want to also just make it one size fits all kind of a scenario, because then we are going to lose the nuances that a specific scenario is going to bring up. Program and project management, at least to me, is all about managing RAID, which is risks, actions, issues, and decisions. What we have is the engagement health assessment, which is basically a set of objective questions, and their responses to the objective questions results in a set of scores and weightage and corresponding color codes. And again, the health assessment is both done by self, which is the project managers do it themselves, and also done by an independent group. Again, the assessment is both on the program parameters as well as the engineering maturity. But whatever is done, the end result has to be, risks, actions, issues, and decisions. And that is what needs to be, that is what needs to be tracked and monitored. Now, it's very important that, we become data driven, because what I've seen is when things go bad, right? When things are not going well, the only thing that comes to the rescue is data and trends, right? When a customer, passes subjective assessment like, what, the code is very buggy, the quality is not good, we are not getting value for money, etc., etc. The only way to push back, the only way to counter these kind of subjective assessments is by data and with all of those trends. And I think Klera definitely helped us, because with all of those visual dashboards and word cloud, which could tell us the problematic pockets, or slicing and dicing and the deep dive, and alerts and emails based on the metrics thresholds, all that definitely helped us to achieve most of what we started out to. Okay, so these were the initial days when we built some of those explorations. So in the Klera world, this is called exploration, where you decide what you want to show and how is the computation going to happen behind the scenes. Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that this is one of the early explorations that we built with the Klera. Exploration is what is used in the Klera world, to define what you want to see, what kind of computation you want to see, etc., by connecting with the right set of tools. This is something recent that we have built, because SAFe is the flavor of the season. Everybody is talking about SAFe and program increments, and everybody wants to know the status of a program increment. What is the status of all the features, how many features are off track, and how many stories in the off track features are off track and at a task level, and so on and so forth. Because executives want to just see, where are we today? Let's see, it's a live execution status of a program increment. This is something as recent as last month that we built for a particular engagement. Now, applying analytics. It is very, very important that, if you want to improve, you need to measure, right? And every business needs analytics, and so does program and project delivery. So, if you want to look at risks, you should be able to take a look at what are my open risks, which risks are aging, which risks have high impact, what is the probability and category. And you should be able to figure out the risks at an engagement level, at a delivery unit level, at a business unit level, and also, the trends because I think that is where the analytics comes into play. I think, when you start looking at trends, it's going to give you fantastic insights. Maybe a particular delivery unit does very well with risk management. Maybe another delivery unit doesn't do a good job with risk management. Or a risk in a particular category may be a big problem for one delivery unit, etc., etc. So those kind of insights is what, applying analytics is going to help us give. And similarly, the quality metric trends, how are we doing on defects? Let's say defect rate, defect density, incorrect fixes, post-release defects, whatever we want to measure across sprints, across PIs, right? How are we trending? Because as we say, it's all about predictability. Can you predict your quality? I think that's the answer this can give. And the metrics threshold that I spoke about, it's very important to analyze it from time to time just to be sure that the limits that you have set, they are good enough. Because if you make it, if you make it too tight, then you're going to get too many alerts. And if it's too loose, then you're hardly going to get any alerts. So it's very important to do the threshold analysis from time to time. One favorite metric that is very close to my heart is, some of the customer influence metrics, and one of them I termed it as requirement stability index. Because when I review an engagement and when I ask a PM, why you're not able to deliver your commitment in this particular sprint, the most of the times the answer I get is, what do we do? There were too many changes introduced during the sprint. But that is not what you're supposed to do. Yeah, we push back to the customer, but the customer is saying, you know what, we can't help it. This is coming from the product. This is coming from the market. So please accommodate. So then I asked them, have you pushed back with data? Have you told them what is the amount of changes that they're introducing? So that is something that they were not measuring. So I said, come up with something very simple. Let's say you have to deliver 50 stories and 10 new stories are getting added. It's a very simple math, right? So that means they are making 20% changes. So 20% is a huge number. So, again, these are the kind of trends you can measure, because this is where, when you go back to the customer with data, then the behavior changes. If you simply tell them you're making too many changes, then they will brush it aside and they will say, you know what, yes, we will try and make less changes. But if you go back to them with data and with trend, then you will definitely see a change in the behavior. I spoke about the health assessment, that we do both at a program metrics as well as engineering maturity, and again done by self as well as the independent group. So again, the trend lines, shows some fantastic insights. Like one particular delivery unit may be doing very well on CI/CD implementation. Another delivery unit may not be doing it so well. So again, these are fantastic insights, which is going to help the delivery unit or the business unit make some course corrections in their span. Yeah, so some of the explorations again that we built. So these are how we, take a look at the risks and the action items. So you can click on a particular project and it helps you to deep dive. What are the statuses by category, by probability, by impact, and even the risks which have missed the target date. I think this is very, very important. So if are not being closed on time, obviously it's a warning that, there could be trouble brewing somewhere. Similarly, for action items and issues, all of these explorations can be built and they're very, very useful. Engineering metrics, pretty familiar. How are you doing sprint on incorrect fix or defect rate, rework, post-release defects, unit test coverage, and all of that. All of these trends, again, provide useful insights. Okay, now, does that mean that if I apply the right process, use the right tools the right way, does it guarantee success? Not necessarily. Although I would say, program management and project management is an underrated skill. And many a times that is what differentiates a successful program from a not so successful program. But a very important aspect is to focus on the engineering rigor, to focus on building in quality, and to focus on building in quality at every stage of the life cycle. And that is something that we have introduced at GlobalLogic. What we do is we focus on, let's say, the requirements quality. We should take a look at user stories, features, epics. We do some sampling and use the invest framework to see if the requirement quality is good enough. We also have developed some in-house, small time tools which look for keywords like maybe, can be, could be, because These are words which are always not watertight, and they're prone to interpretation. And when a requirement is prone to interpretation, it always causes a lot of headache later on in the life cycle. And what we do is, when we do these requirements audits or requirements review, based on the response to, based on the quality of the invest framework that is applied, there is a weightage and a scorecard and a color code which comes up. And again, we can do the trending of the requirements quality across engagements, across a delivery unit, in a business unit. This is again going to give very useful insights. Let's say a particular delivery unit does a good job. They're trending well. That means the quality of their proxy product management is good, or their definition of done, definition of ready is good. While the other one, in case it's not trending well, there has to be some problem which needs to be fixed, right? So that's what engineering rigor and measuring and monitoring the engineering rigor, puts in the right perspective. Similarly, for design and architecture quality, what we do is, design and architecture reviews are very resource intensive. They are extremely difficult, and not it's not easy to do a complete design and architecture quality review. So what we usually do is pick up some constructs which may be the most critical for a particular engagement. Let's say for design, we could pick exception handling or logging. For architecture, we could pick scalability, performance, security, depending upon what is most critical for an engagement, and we could do a deep dive review. And then again, the set of objective questions. And they also take a look at the code or the architecture artifacts, the design artifacts, and accordingly they will give score, weightage, and there's a color code which corresponds to it. So you can again take a look at the trends of the design or the architecture within a business unit, within a delivery unit, across engagements, and it again provides very useful pointers and insights, right? One delivery unit may be very good on design, but maybe very poor on architecture, vice versa, and so on. Same with code quality. You can take a look at the technical debt trends or the blocker critical defect trends. Similarly, for test artifacts, the coverage and the quality of the automation or unit tests and so on. So we focus a lot on engineering rigor and the trend lines of those. They provide very useful insights. So as I said, we do independent reviews, and those independent reviews give rise to a lot of action items or risks identification. And again, you can select a particular project and do a deep dive as to why was it color coded as amber. So obviously that means there are some pressing risks or action items that need to be done. Okay, so what is most important is to approach this entire exercise from a business perspective. We need to figure out what is the value for the delivery leader and what is the value for the customer, right? So if the delivery leader is able to see the value, then obviously they will put pressure on their teams to follow the right processes, follow the right tools, and hence the quality of data will get better. And when the quality of data gets better, then obviously the trends will get better and your insights and analysis will be a lot more correct. And then they will start to get more value. So it's a vicious circle, right? It's a chicken and egg situation. You can't wait, Bhavin, again, to come back to the question that you asked. You can't wait for the data to be pristine, clear, and then start the process. This takes, this is something that gets better and better over a period of time. And similarly for the customer will appreciate once you're able to show them something like the live dashboard that I showed, and you take them the bad news, you break the bad news to them as and when it happens, and not, break the bad news to them one day before the release, right? Telling them until then that everything is fine. Nobody likes it. Everybody understands that things can go wrong, but it's important to tell them as and when it happens, and also go to them with a actionable plan, because that's when you will win over the trust of the customer, and they will start to believe you, and your NPS will definitely improve. And most important is, don't behave like a compliance auditor. When you're doing an independent review, you have to coach and mentor the delivery leaders and tell them that, yes, these are genuine problems. These are genuine challenges. We understand. Well, this could be an option. This is the way to handle it. This is the way to address it. And the best way to do it is have a lot of facilitation sessions to help them address the gaps, to help them fix a particular trend which is not so positive, which is going in the negative direction. And of course, predictable delivery has to be the top priority for delivery leaders. If it is their top priority, they will push their teams to, behave in a responsible way, follow the right processes, use the right tools, and that will in turn change the behavior and hence, shift the culture. And the only way to do reviews should be done by using these kind of frameworks, whether it's an early warning system framework or any analytic tool or whatever. But no review should be done with powerpoints and decks, so no death by powerpoints at all. Because the moment the reviews are done with a live dashboard or with live frameworks which are only data driven, then you get a lot of insights, and that also pushes the teams to go back and use the processes and tools the right way. So if you do all of this right, then I can guarantee that the NPS is going to be much much better than the industry benchmarks. The surprise escalations will go down drastically, and hence the cost to manage surprise escalations will also come down drastically. Just wanted to show, a early warning system that we developed a couple of years back. This could be one of the ways. And again, the exploration of Klera has come a long way. There are much better ways to do it today. But this is something close to my heart because this was one of the first ones that we built. Now, let's say a particular project, the schedule is red, right? So that could be because the release date was 4th July, but now it is 7th August. So maybe the threshold we set was more than 10%, right? Because it's whatever, 22.88%. That's the reason there is an alert and there is it is red and so on. For quality, it is green because, maybe we set the threshold as any defects less than 15, it's okay, right? It's manageable. And similarly for the requirement stability index, maybe less than 1.5 is acceptable. That's why it's a green. So, as I said, it could be customizable and defined based on specifics. So the key takeaways, I would say most important is figure out the metrics framework. What is it that we want to measure? And try and see if it can address most of the methodologies and engagement models for a particular sector, company. And important to apply analytics so that we become proactive and predictive and we do not become reactive and defensive. And extremely important to focus on engineering rigor, build in quality. And of course, it has to be the executive priority, because if that is not the priority, then very difficult to change the behavior and hence change the culture. That brings me to the end.
Well, a little bit about Klera. Before we enter the Q&A section, Nandini referred to Klera having helped GlobalLogic in developing this early warning framework. Obviously, the thinking elements came from GlobalLogic. Klera helped them channelize that into something real, something tangible, something actionable. So what is Klera? I'll just take a couple of minutes. Klera is a platform that allows people to develop intelligent apps across tools and platforms, and that too very rapidly in minutes. One of the things that Nandini referred to earlier is in GlobalLogic itself, they were using a number of different tools. Now, of course, she was giving her own example, but this is very common across enterprises where people use a number of different tools because that's what they're most comfortable with. The challenge is, how do you go across all of them to build a story? More importantly, can you streamline that process by directly connecting with your source data and then take that uh, to the customers so that there is ground reality in it? So what Klera helped GlobalLogic or other enterprises do is enable the organization by connecting directly with the various tools, platforms, databases that they have in their environment. Because even GlobalLogic, when they started, they really didn't have the time to go ahead and extract data and follow a typical business intelligence paradigm by creating a data lake first and then apply traditional BI tools on top. By using Klera's connectors, which are bidirectional in nature, they tapped into the data sources directly and got a series of insights that Nandini shared with you today, reusable templates and apps that they were able to apply across different engagement models, set up those alerts and triggers she referred to by looking at the various thresholds, right? And defining those and customizing those because they varied by engagement. And more importantly, take actions directly on the underlying connected tools themselves, right? So it's not only about reading, but it's also about writing that brings a lot of immediate actionable capability. Now, this insight delivery is a part of what Klera can do. Again, you're welcome to visit Klera.io to check out other types of use cases that Klera can enable. And not just GlobalLogic. Before I conclude, I wanted to share that Klera has been applied in different industries as well, whether it be retail, advertising, unified communications, telecom, media. And in every scenario, Klera, by connecting directly to the data sources, has streamlined operations where customers, independent of the methodology they're using, and Nandini mentioned a few, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, OKR, etc., customers have been able to see, over 93% savings in time and cost. Think about one missed SLA and the impact of that. Think about one missed delivery. Think about a declining NPS score. Think about not having to worry about, how do I go about measuring performance rather than dealing with, now that I've measured it quickly, what do I do about it, right? So that's the paradigm shift in terms of worrying about, instead of the how, let's worry about the what and the impact to your customer, no matter what industry you may be in, right? So again, you're welcome to learn more about it on our website. Now, what I would like to do is open the floor, because we're coming up on time, to move to the Q&A section. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today to attend this session. I would now like to open it up to audience questions that have been posted on the Q&A panel. I'll kick off with the first question, Nandini. I think it's directed to you. The first question is, you talked about an account manager rating the project and relationship. How reliable is that on a relationship basis level? We've seen a conflict between PMs, I'm assuming project managers, and AMs, account managers, which results in below average ratings at times. Does that give a clear picture at an account level?
Thanks for the question. See, a project manager and account manager, they will be looking at an engagement from different perspectives because their DNA is different and their responsibilities and accountabilities for the engagement is a little different. Although I believe at the highest level, it must align, which is, we are in the business of delighting the customer. While a PM looks at it from day-to-day transactional management, an AM looks at it from relationship, the value, the stickiness perspective. Ideally, they should be in sync. And when that's not the case, it's important for them to align first. But both perspectives are equally important, and they both have to be taken into consideration, especially when there's a conflict. And we must understand the cause of the conflict and work towards the resolution.
That's some great insight, Nandini. Thank you. So the next question is, can we get the PPT? Well, I'll take that one. The recording will be available on Klera's website under the resources section. So we won't be mailing out the PPT, but you're welcome to look at the recording, the individual websites of GlobalLogic and Klera. And you feel free to reach out to any of us in case you have any further queries around this topic. Thank you again. Moving on to the next question. What kind of tools do you use to collect the data about a project, and what kind of data is gathered? Nandini, would you like to give an example here?
Sure. I think, when it comes to tools, it's a variety of tools actually, from Jira, PPM, TFS, Google Sheets, Rally, ALM, each and every tool that is used for project and program management actually. And the data which is usually collected is data pertaining to planned and actual effort at the task level, capacity, defect related data. basically every data that can help determine predictability of schedule, scope, and quality.
Thank you. And I can add a little more color to it, having worked with other enterprises as well, that Klera basically can also connect to 50 different tools, databases, and platforms out of the box to enable applications across them. What kind of data is gathered is also a function of the contextual analysis and the use case that someone's trying to solve, right? So as Nandini gave you an example of an early warning system, there are many other customers that are also trying to look at quality metrics, reliability metrics, end-to-end delivery, just ticketing metrics in terms of SLA performance, or even at the planning and financial level. So it's a function of the use cases, and contextual data fetching can be enabled using the Klera connectors available out of box. All right, moving forward to the next question. Does Klera integrate with standard tools like Azure DevOps to show metrics? I think I can answer that. The answer is yes. Klera does integrate with tools like Azure DevOps. In fact, one of the examples Nandini showed earlier in the presentation was using Azure DevOps information to give visibility in terms of execution of a current program increment, readiness in terms of the next program increment, and many other views can be enabled in terms of understanding story, feature, etc. statuses as well, directly from Azure DevOps connected on Klera. All right, the next question would be, would SMBs, small and medium businesses, benefit from the early warning framework, or is it only designed to handle scale? Nandini, this is directed to you.
Well, I believe everybody will benefit from adopting this early warning framework. And in fact, I would highly recommend that this be adopted as early as possible, because that will help establish the right behavior and culture. The with the delay, with more scale, and it becomes harder, because inculcating the right behavior and culture gets harder when the population is large, and the journey does get harder. So the earlier the better would be my recommendation.
Makes perfect sense. Get started early, get ahead of the curve early. All right, the next question is, we took an example of accommodating 20% CRs, change requests, within a running sprint. What happens if those required stories take more importance than others? How would business analysis or requirement gathering could be adjusted within a running sprint, say for 10 man days, a generic sprint? Nandini, any thoughts there?
Yeah, the ideal scenario is don't entertain any changes, right? I mean, that's the ideal scenario, but we all understand that that's not the ideal world that we are living in. So the philosophy has to be pretty simple. If something more important needs to get addressed, something less important needs to be taken off from that sprint. I think the key is balance. You can only deliver based on the capacity that's been planned and the base velocity. Hence, if something more critical has to get in, something of equal effort needs to be taken off.
Got it. Makes sense. It's a give and take mechanism, and well put, Nandini. All right, I think we have time to squeeze in one more question. It says, these days, Agile is the key. However, it might not fit for fixed cost, mid-sized projects. Based on our experiences, it fits in where we have a roadmap, but not concrete requirements per se, especially products. How could we get rid of this hybrid model and move to core Agile?
So there are multiple ways of doing it. One way would be, do a short discovery phase, maybe like 3 to 4, 5 weeks of discovery phase, so that we spend a lot of time trying to nail down the requirements, trying to get more clarity on the requirements, because that will help us to bid for a fixed bid, which we are more confident, right? We don't have to put in too many buffers and assumptions and dependencies. So that could be one way, have a discovery phase followed by a implementation phase, which is fixed bid. Or the other option could be, start with multiple phases, and every phase only take on requirements which are, kind of clarified. So work with a backlog which is kind of sorted and clarified. So that way, Agile can be implemented. So these are, two options that I can think of, but I'm sure there are many others. But this is something that is, coming to my mind right away.
Thank you very much, Nandini. I think that's about the time we have to accommodate questions. Please feel free to, again, follow up if there are further questions or clarifications you may need on this topic. Nandini, I would like to thank you for your time today in sharing the amazing journey that you had from a pre-early warning world to where you are today. And I would also like to thank the audience for joining us for today's session. And we hope to see you for future upcoming webinars planned around various other topics. Nandini, would you like to say a few words before we close out?
Yeah, thanks, Bhavin, and thanks, Klera, for helping us implement this journey and for making this journey, pretty easy for us. And I want to thank the audience, everybody who joined in. And if you have questions that we have not been able to address, feel free to, connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll be happy to share our journey and any more details that anybody is interested in.
Right. Thank you very much.